Daniel said, you have a good idea. We should write together and split the money, so I tell all you wannabe writers out there, just go find a established author. Tell them I've got a good idea. You should write it and we'll split the money. Because for me, it works 100% of the time.
Well, and the original plan was Ty had done like all of this amazing world building, all of this like really in-depth research, and had a really complete understanding of the setting. And I had written at that point like 5 or 6 books, so I kind of knew how to write books. And my thought was, I can bring this skill set. He can bring that skill set. He can just, tell me what happens in the story and I can write it down and then it'll turn into a book, which worked for about a minute. And then I had done a chapter and Ty was like, that's a good chapter and it's well written, but it's not right. And then after that, I wound up only doing half of the writing. So, one for me.
What is up, everybody? You're listening to episode 117 of SFF Addicts. I'm your host, Adrian M. Gibson, and welcome to your weekly dive into the world of science fiction, fantasy, and writing craft. Joining me, as always, my co-host, the Chewie to my Han Solo, the Joker to my Commander Shepard, MJ Kuhn. How's it going, MJ?
Hi there. I am doing well, Adrian. How are you?
Doing fantastic today. And if you want to support MJ, because she's a fantastic human being, you can go pick up her debut novel, Among Thieves. That beautiful blue baby right there. And you can pick up the sequel, Thick Ass Thieves, if you want a nice hefty dose of heists and thieving goodness and hatchets. So many hatchets and quite a lot of killing, but it's really good. Go check it out.
Make it sound so brutal. Yeah, you can also support Adrian if you'd like to check out his debut novel, Mushroom Blues, for your dose of fungal noir. There you go. Fungal punk.
Get your fungal fix. As well, a quick note for listeners, the official SFF Addicts Patreon and merch store are live, so check the links in the description to support what we do here. Also, don't forget to rate and review the podcast on your favorite podcast app and subscribe to the FanFiAddict YouTube channel where this and every other episode of the show is available in full video. And now, welcoming today's 2 guests. Today, we're very excited to welcome Daniel Abraham and Ty Franck, the joint minds behind the powerhouse that is James S.A. Corey, authors of The Expanse and the newly released Mercy of the Gods. Welcome to the show, you two. How are you doing?
I have coffee.
Daniel's good. He's got coffee.
Yeah, we're good.
All
Ty
right.
Ty has coffee.
It looks like Ty has coffee too.
It's rude to just bring coffee for yourself. It's got to be for the whole class.
Got to take it up to the pool house, man.
There we go. There we go.
All right, well, let's start off with an introduction for listeners who aren't familiar with you. Can you each tell us a little bit about yourself and your work? We'll start with you, Daniel.
I'm Daniel Abraham. I've written a lot of books, most of them at this point with Ty, under my name, Daniel Abraham, which is the kind of slightly over-cerebral epic fantasy. MLN Hanover, which is a series of 5... urban fantasy books that I wrote that nobody reads, and then The Expanse, which is kind of the thing that we're known for. Been writing The Expanse since Leviathan Wakes came out in 2011. We were deeply involved in the adaptation, first at Sci-Fi and then at Amazon, and and now we've got this new trilogy coming out. So,
yeah, we're very, very excited about it. Ty, what about you? You want to let us know a little bit more about yourself?
No. I'm Ty. I'm a novelist, screenwriter, producer, game designer, that kind of stuff. Misanthrope.
Thanks for the
world's worst interview.
Oh, shush now.
Oh my gosh.
Before we dig deeper into the episode, a quick word from our sponsor.
Bren Caius is a living legend, the greatest warrior of her age. But much of her legacy is a lie, fabricated by those in desperate need of a champion. As High General of Aemon, Bren has grown weary of commanding a dwindling army against the Knoll warlord Cret Bonebreaker and his fearsome legion. Amidst the bloodshed, she must lead her soldiers to victory while contending with a disloyal advisor, a mysterious prophet, the cruel ambitions of nobles, and ghosts from her past. The fate of Aemon rests upon a single epic battle, one of fire, steel, and magic. Can Bren stand against the darkness and become the hero she's expected to be? War of the Hounds is a gripping tale set in the world of the Dryad's crown and based on Shakespeare's Henry V. It's the story of Bren's greatest triumph and her most heartbreaking failure. War of the Hounds is available for free. Visit thatdavidhopkins.com and sign up for the Epic Fantasy newsletter to receive a free download of this ebook.
And now, enjoy the rest of this episode of SFF Addicts.
Well, to get to know you guys a little bit more, we always like to explore the nerdy origins of our guests because the best part about making the show is that we're all just cool nerds hanging out together. So, do you each remember if there were any particular books, shows, movies, even video games, anything like that in your youth that first kind of drew you into science fiction and fantasy? We'll start with Ty this time.
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned many times that the Expanse is just fan fiction for Alfred Bester. I was a kid when somebody bought a book of like 4 novellas or 5 novellas in one book called like the Best of Science Fiction or something. It was an old hardcover with like the paper cover had been torn off, so it was just the book. And I don't remember any of the other stories in that book, but one of them was Star's My Destination by Alfred Bester. And I was way too young to read it. I was probably like 9, and that's a very grown-up novella. But yeah, I mean, from then on, I was always looking for something that felt like Star's My Destination. And then when we wrote The Expanse, we were writing my fan fiction for Star's My Destination. And then when I was like 12 or so, I saw Alien the first time, Ridley Scott's masterpiece. And that slotted right into that part of my brain where Star's My Destination lived. So I think those two are probably my biggest influences.
And thus the proto-molecule was born. Daniel, what about you?
Oh, my first experience with science fiction was, it was a summer, sometime after I was 7, and before I was 12. My father gave me a library-bound copy of Arthur C. Clarke's Islands in the Sky. The first story in the collection is The 9 Billion Names of God. And I was on the porch swing in kind of the sweltering heat of New Mexico summer. And I got to the end of that story and it blew the top of my head off. And I never entirely recovered. And yeah, that was, I was kind of an omnivorous reader when I still am, but when I was young, I was reading whatever I could put my hands on. And a lot of it wound up being, of varying quality, but I was great enthusiasm. I mean, I read a lot of Piers Anthony, and as far as I can tell, got away mostly unscathed. A lot of Arthur, a lot of Zelazny, a lot of Fred Saberhagen. Actually, got to work with Fred Saberhagen when I was in high school. So yeah, those were my ways in.
I like it. Yeah. But it's good. Like, it doesn't matter about the quality. I feel like the stuff that we read as children and growing up, nostalgia kind of keeps them in a safe place for us.
Oh yeah, it papers over some sharp edges.
As long as you don't go back. Have you ever heard of anyone talking about the Suck Fairy?
No, what is the Suck Fairy?
The Suck Fairy is the thing that comes with those wonderful books that you read when you were young. So you think, oh man, I remember David Eddings. He was awesome. Everything about him was so good. And then you go back and you open and you think, oh, the Suck Fairy came. Now it sucks.
Oh no.
Suck Fairy came and just sprinkled suck all over my favorite books.
I have definitely experienced that, though, going back and reading something many years later and being like, oh, I remember this being better.
I have not. I mentioned David Eddings because I read a lot of David Eddings when I was in high school. I have not gone back to reread him because what could I gain, really?
Yeah.
Why tempt it?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, you're just tempting the Suck Fairy at that point. Instead of leaving coins, I'm just gonna like leave this book covered in just shit and sadness.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, in a more positive note, you two working together. I think this is something that I've always been curious about in terms of how you two started your collaboration as James S.A. Corey. Daniel, when we spoke a couple years ago, it was kind of like you told me about the sort of collaborative nature you had when it came to like role-playing games and stuff like that. But if you two want to elaborate a little bit more on how this collaboration began and how it flourished.
Daniel said, you have a good idea. We should write together and split the money, which is,
yep, that's what happened.
So I tell all you wannabe writers out there, just go find a established author.
Daniel.
Tell him I've got a good idea. You should write it and we'll split the money. Because for me, it works 100% of the time.
Well, and the original plan was Ty had done like all of this amazing world building, all of this like really in-depth research, and had a really complete understanding of the setting. And I had written at that point like 5 or 6 books, so I kind of knew how to write books. And my thought was, I can bring this skill set, he can bring that skill set. He can just, tell me what happens in the story and I can write it down and then it'll turn into a book, which worked for about a minute. And then I had done a chapter and Ty was like, that's a good chapter and it's well written, but it's not right. And then after that, I wound up only doing half of the writing. So one for me.
Yeah, Ty, you lost out.
Yeah, you had a chance.
Well, I mean, there's certainly been times where, because Daniel is compelled to write prose, like he can't stop himself. I have certainly misused that. It has happened when we were really heavy into the producing the television show. I was on set for every day of photography for 5 seasons, and Daniel wasn't, because he had a kid at home and he didn't want to be away from home. So I did allow Daniel, or I shouldn't say allow, I did get out of Daniel's way as he was like, I'm just going to do the first draft of everything while you're gone.
Which, and understand when we say, oh, well, I'm going to do the first draft of everything while you're doing 14 to 16 hour days, 5 days a week. I feel like I got off light on that one. I feel like, I don't feel like this was, I had to do all of the heavy lifting while you failed to sleep for 5 years. It's all good.
That's Daniel allowing Ty some.
There's an argument to be made that the trick to a good collaboration is everybody feels like the other guy does more work.
Totally, though, right? And I feel like that's like just a sign that the work has been divvied up, where everyone's kind of doing the piece maybe that they enjoy the most.
Should be doing.
I'm continuing to. My goal is to reach a point where my only job is to have the good ideas and then get out of the way. And I'm continuing to develop that. Daniel and I are in a company now, a production company with a few partners. And it is actually sort of evolving to the point where I just go, hey, what if the story was this? Everybody goes, yeah. And then they all go off and do a bunch of work and I just get out of the way. Did you guys watch Seinfeld?
Yeah.
There's an episode where George realizes that he gets one good funny line in each interaction, and he has to do is, once he's said the funny line, is just leave. So So I'm trying to do that with like, everybody's like, well, what should we do about this? I'll go, hey, what if the story was this? And everybody goes, yeah. And then I just like quietly slip out the back.
Dude,
so that's my goal.
I'm just gonna drop my peak pitch and then I'm gonna ghost.
And then I'm just gonna go
out of here.
That's my goal.
That's so good, man. That is dreams. That is dreams right there.
We are working with I'm a little compulsive about writing, and one of our other guys is equally without social boundaries around his work. So we kind of feed each other, and it's like, oh, well, we need to work on this. What are we doing on Sunday morning? Oh, Sunday morning sounds great. We're those guys. So we'll fill in the compulsive slot just fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And every now and again, Ty can come in and tell us how to do it right, and then we'll do that. It'll be great.
And then he'll ghost again.
And then he'll ghost again. Well, let's talk a little more about The Expanse. That one of those fantastic ideas, right? Because one of the things I really loved about reading.
Did you realize that until I pointed it out to you, MJ?
I didn't, and then as soon as you pointed it out, I was like, "Oh my god!" And I went back and looked. So it's just the series of books seamlessly explores this like parade of genre blends, which is super fun, right? So you have like space opera plus noir for Leviathan Wakes, and then space opera plus Western, right? You've got a whole bunch of little mashups. Was this blending, were these mashups intentional from the start? Was that something that kind of evolved as you kept writing the series? Just how did that all come about?
I mean, it was fairly intentional.
Yeah. I mean, one of the fun things about science fiction is that it doesn't have kind of a base story. Like the way that the mystery, you have mystery, somebody's going to get killed and somebody's going to try to figure out who it was, and you kind of, either they'll get away or they won't, but you kind of know what you're in for. Romance stories, if a romance story is really all about the baseball team and whether they win the thing, it's not really a romance story anymore. There's a story that goes with that genre. Science fiction just incorporates all those other stories. It just takes them in and reforms them and spits them back. So you can have science fiction horror, you can have science fiction romance, you can have science fiction adventure, you can have science fiction crime thriller. They all fold in just fine, which I think is what Samuel Delany meant when he talked about science fiction being a mode of writing, not a genre. But he's way smarter than me, so I might be wrong. So yeah, we talked a lot about how to kind of fold genres into what we were doing with The Expanse, kind of as a way to explore that.
And I get tired of doing things very quickly. Like, I'm never bored because the minute anything starts to feel even slightly boring, I just leave and go do something else. But because of that, Daniel has had to find ways to trick me into staying engaged. So one of the tricks,
it's all mind games.
One of the tricks that Daniel pulls is hey, what if we did this, but we did it this other way that we haven't done before? Because that will pique my interest. Like, oh, learning a new skill. Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do that. So part of what Daniel's pitching me very often is, let's do a thing we've never done before, because that's how I stay interested. Yeah.
So yeah, let's do science fiction epic that's also a Western.
Yeah. It's like, without any cowboys, we just have like a really shitty planet that just does everything it can to try and kill you.
That tries to kill everyone.
Which, I mean, if you read Westerns, that's kind of the American Southwest, really.
Yeah.
Right? 100%. Yeah.
It's like, Illis is the new California. It all works perfectly.
There's a bunch of Westerns that take place in an area of the Midwest that is literally called the Badlands. I mean, when somebody calls a whole huge chunk of the country the Badlands, it's not because it was awesome to live there.
Right. There's foreshadowing there.
Like, very, very blatant foreshadowing. Well, building on beyond genre, we have a question from one of our patrons, David Hopkins, who wanted to ask you too, in terms of what you write together, what you feel are some of the unique characteristics of your collaborative novels, sort of like quintessential elements that you kind of aim for with the James S.A. Corey books.
Oh, good Lord. He's thought about this way more than I have.
He's also an author, so he has that sort of mind.
So
I mean, Oh, go ahead, Daniel.
No, you take it. I'll think some more. I'm trying to something clever.
Well, I mean, I don't think we've ever analyzed it or said, James S.A. Corey book must include these things in order to be James S.A. Corey. But it's sort of like porn. I know it when I see it. So when Daniel and I are writing, I mean, one of the things that comes up for us is I'll go, this doesn't sound like Jimmy. This because we, Jimmy is the name we give to our collaboration, James. And when it's Jimmy, it's really obvious. And I don't know what the process is that creates that, but it's really obvious to me when it happens.
Daniel, is that kind of like I remember when we spoke last time, you were saying like when you approach chapters, you're sort of brainstorming how this particular chapter could be like the most awesome it could possibly be. Does that kind of play into it?
That's what we've been doing pretty much all summer. Is going through and talking through story and kind of imagining our way into these things and finding the most interesting characters to see particular things and the most interesting moments that kind of occur to us as we walk through these and I think that there's something that comes from having somebody else who's deeply in a story and you bounce ideas back and forth and they do something. I throw an idea to Ty and he hears something that is different and better than what I had meant to say. So I get to claim credit for something that's actually cooler than what I had in mind because he interpreted it into something that was like awesome. And there's a feedback loop in there that I think makes things richer or can make things richer. And I think there's also an interesting thing that happens with just the style of the prose. I think that if you read a James S.A. Corey novel and you read a Daniel Abraham novel, they don't, one of them has a different cadence. One of them has a different voice. And that's part of that is the genre and part of that is the expectation. These don't read like fantasy because fantasy has its whole Elfland Poughkeepsie issue. But part of it is that it's just not all the way I put words together. It's also the way Ty does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I've seen a lot of people online try to analyze and figure out which of us wrote which thing. And they're almost always completely wrong. So whatever's happening when we do this, it's creating like a stealth field because the things that people go, well, Daniel is this kind of person, so he clearly wrote these chapters. Almost always I'm the one that wrote those chapters and vice versa. So I don't know what it is about, the process that we go through that sort of obfuscates which of us is doing the thing, but there is something happening there.
That's beautiful though. That kind of like synchronicity creates this seamless illusion, which I think especially for collaboration is very important. We'll talk more about collaboration
we'll get
next episode.
Yeah, I was going to say we're going to dive into that.
We'll get there.
Wait till next episode.
Teaser for the masterclass. Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the political dynamics in the Expanse because I feel like they're very realistic. For a completely fictional society. But were there any particular sources of inspiration or experiences or anything like that really informed this aspect of the writing or inspired kind of those dynamics?
So I'm big into history. I spend a lot of time reading and viewing things about history, and I particularly love pre-classical history, but it doesn't have to be that. I mean, just yesterday, Daniel caught me watching a whole thing on the Chinese history of siege warfare. So, I mean, it almost doesn't matter what kind of history it is. And the thing that I have learned from that, and the reason I am cynical and a misanthrope, is that humans have been sucking in exactly the same way for the entirety of recorded history. We make this, like, I will talk about stuff with Daniel that I'm like, hey, we should base this character on this Babylonian king from like 4,600 years ago. And then we'll put it in the book and people go, oh, you were talking about Donald Trump, weren't you? No, we're not. No, it's just that humans never seem to get any better at that stuff. We just always keep sucking in the same way. And so if you just make the fiction feel like any point in history, it feels like every point in history. As just sort of our take on it. And so you just pull from history, put it in the book, and everybody goes, wow, this is so germane to modern times.
Yeah, so
this thing that you pulled from 4,000 years ago.
It's been on point for thousands of years.
Right. It's always been on point.
It has always been on point. It remains on point.
Right.
Yeah.
We dream of the day it's not on point.
From the past, present to the future, it's on point.
The day when those things are no longer true is the day that we're not human anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, there was this whole idea about post-humanity and the idea of what happens when we transcend human nature, and it's always couched in the terms of uploading consciousness and other children's stories. And
sorry, Ray Kurzweil.
And yeah, dude, no. And really, I think when we have become post-human, it's going to be when we're not judging our success by whether we have more than our neighbor. That's as much as it would take for us not to be human anymore. To just be able to say, I have enough. I don't need more than John. It'd be a whole different dynamic. It would change everything.
Yeah, it's like small tweaks to our nature as opposed to our biology, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if we're on servers in the cloud arguing about, who's more masculine, it's not really changing anything.
All right, now I want to see that story. The computers arguing over whose hard drive has more megabits on it. Yeah.
We would. We would.
It's just like showing off on. I mean, that would probably be the best way that a computer would show off. It'd be like, my motherboard's more powerful than yours. Yeah.
Look at what I can do with my graphic board.
But I love how in the Expanse you guys ended up playing around with that, with the proto-molecule as kind of like this post-human sort of trigger for several characters. Like Amos is one of my favorite characters in the books and in the TV series. It's kind of cool to see like how, spoilers, if anyone's listening to this, go read the entirety of the Expanse.
Right, and then come back.
Pause. Hit pause and then
pause. Go read 9+ books.
Yeah,
nine novels and a book, short stories.
It's only about
but the ways in which like characters like Amos or Duarte, how they transform their nature with the proto-molecule kind of as the catalyst is, and especially the way they change. Obviously they change a lot biologically and physically, but their nature and the way that they perceive the universe changes a lot too. So I really enjoyed the way that you guys tackled that in the series.
Well, and that came in pretty late in the series too. Part of what we wanted to do when we laid the whole thing out was kind of go from late Apollo 13 to early Buck Rogers. So as you get into those later books and things are getting more and more speculative and more abstract and more kind of fantastic, you get to play with some of those ideas that are hard to do when you're doing something that's almost near future.
Yeah.
Well, kind of in that vein, I want to talk a little bit about a question that comes up a lot with sci-fi writers, particularly, is this kind of idea of realism versus like entertainment value. And how did you guys approach balancing like scientific accuracy with storytelling in your fiction?
I mean, if you're a fiction writer, your number one job is to be entertaining. And anybody who claims differently is a bad writer. That is ultimately you are trying to give people a reason to turn the page, and the way you do that is you entertain them. Now, I'm talking about fiction here. I'm not talking about like obviously textbooks and things like that. But with fiction, you're saying I'm going to tell you a story. It's going to be fascinating. It's going to be fun to read or enlightening to read, and every page is an invitation to turn the next page so that you can keep going. Right. If scientific plausibility is a way to make it more entertaining, then it's a good tool to use. If it's not a way to make it more entertaining, then use a different tool. I mean, Star Wars doesn't need scientific plausibility to be entertaining. It's doing a different kind of project. What Daniel and I were doing was showing humans that feel like us with the same stuff we have, confronting something that is an existential threat that is not something we can comprehend. And the only way to do that is to start the humans out feeling like us, which is they don't have magic. They don't have any, they're recognizably us. They're flying around in ships that we can imagine building. So that when the crazy thing happens, it feels crazy. Because if the crazy thing shows up on page one, then everything is possible and all the craziness is available now. So in that case, plausibility is a tool that you're using to tell the kind of story you want to tell. It's not a rule that you're under. It's not like a restriction you place on yourself just for the sake of having a restriction. It's part of the storytelling. So for me, those things are not divided. They are the same thing.
Yeah.
Daniel, do you have any thoughts
on
that?
What he said.
What Tyson?
Like +1.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Well, I want to ask in terms of like your perceptions of, because the ways in which you two think about the past, present, and future and humanity within that time frame and within that context, how your perspectives on humanity's future, specifically in space, now that we have like all this crazy shit going on, every billionaire wants to have like a space company and what have you, like Elon Musk wants to colonize Mars, et cetera, et cetera. These things are at the very least in like the public consciousness, regardless of how plausible they are in our lifetimes. But how have your perspectives changed on humanity's future in space and sort of, I mean, obviously there's probably not like a ring gate out in the end of the solar system.
We don't know.
Like we don't fucking know yet, but there's a plausibility of humanity expanding further into the solar system now.
I will say that I really hope our future in space is not dictated by Elon fucking Musk.
Preach.
He will not be our Winston Duarte.
No.
I think one of the so I'm going to rant for a second. One of the things that science fiction I think does badly is educate people about the actual ways that science functions. I remember when I was a kid, there was a Spider-Man TV show where they cloned Peter Parker so that they could get Spider-Man's memories. It's like, okay, this is a bad job. We are lying to people about what clones are. I think we're in the middle right now of lying to people about what artificial intelligence is. I think we have told a bunch of stories about artificial intelligence as a way to have a metaphor for mostly Pygmalion or the Golem of Prague stories over and over and over. And so when something like ChatGPT comes out, people misunderstand what it is. I think the challenges of moving little sacks of water and nutrients that have grown up in gravity off of their planet, out of their air supply, into places without air or gravity is going to be a lot harder than people imagine it will be. I think it'll be interesting to do exploratory work, and I think some of the things that we've done with robotics and with like the helicopter on Mars, that was amazing. That was really good work. I think gathering knowledge about our solar system and about the universe, I think we can do some amazing things. Building apartment buildings, there's some really basic questions we don't have answers to. Like, what happens when you get pregnant in microgravity? No one's ever done it. We don't know. It's probably not going to be pretty.
No. That's something I always appreciated about The Expanse, and now like reading The Mercy of Gods, that you two put a lot of thought into the ways in which the environment affect the people that inhabit those environments, the ways the belters basically like
develop differently.
They develop differently. There's a lot of conversation about what different environments do to different people. What happens if you like transport a baby on a ship across like space and across through the ring gates and all that? It's like, we don't fucking know what happens to a child within the womb, let alone a child that is born and has to develop and has to grow physically in so many different ways.
Well, and we don't know how to keep kidneys functioning or eyes.
You're like, let's take it back a step further even.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, so
the thing that sci-fi has consistently done is tell us that the easy things are hard and the hard things are easy. Because, you know, so in The Expanse, we have a moment, and this was especially after the TV show did it, where somebody's briefly exposed to vacuum. And the number of people who go, why didn't they immediately explode? And or the people go, why didn't that person instantly freeze? Because sci-fi there's a million of examples of bad sci-fi telling you that people explode the minute they're exposed to vacuum, and a million examples of bad sci-fi telling you that people instantly freeze when they're exposed to vacuum. So people who have been educated by sci-fi believe these things are true, and they're not. But sci-fi also tells you it's super easy to fly up to Mars and build apartment buildings. Because, you know, whenever we show Mars in the future, there's apartment buildings there. And that's actually really hard. So don't worry, you're not going to explode if you're exposed to vacuum for 15 seconds. You'll be fine. People don't understand that. And at the same time, they also think, well, why don't we already have apartment buildings on Mars? Because that looks super easy. So it's like we get it wrong both directions over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
What we're good at, though, is inspiring people to imagine things. We're good at giving people imagery or ideas, and then a bunch of people see that when they are 8 or 9, and then they go become engineers when they're in college, and then you get flip phones, because that's how Jim Kirk was.
Yeah, because they all wanted to be Captain Kirk when they were 7, so they invented flip phones when they're 30. Yep.
Oh my gosh, I never heard that anecdote.
Yeah, there are a lot of. I think it's particularly like that era of science fiction from like the 50s, 60s, and 70s that inspired a lot of the technologies that came out in the 80s and 90s.
Well, and we've been trying to rebuild Neuromancer since it was published.
I don't want to live in this sprawl. That would be horrible.
I know, right? All of these guys who thought it was a utopia, I don't understand them, but they're building it.
That'd be a hellhole to live in.
It is. It is right now.
Right? You're like, different from now. How?
Yeah.
We don't have like sprawling mega cities, but you know, the rest of it is coming to fruition.
You know.
Have you been to LA recently?
I was going to say debatable.
I avoid LA as much as I can.
Except that.
Say again?
Oh, I was going to say, except that absolutely nobody bothers to use the metaverse. Like whole, we're going to turn the internet into a graphical representation of the data and stuff. Nobody does that. You know, and by the way, I've loved William Gibson, so I'm not bashing William Gibson at all. I love his books. But this idea that the way you interact with the internet and the way you interact with data is put on a VR headset and data looks like cubes and ice looks like monsters. And nobody uses that because it turns out that a white screen with a search bar in it is better.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Like a completely white screen with a bar, you say, how many people have, salmonella? And it instantly gives you all the answers, and everything about salmonella instantly appears on your screen. It's so much better than flying around in a virtual space touching cubes.
Or like,
Yeah.
what is it, like Mark Zuckerberg's goofy ass
Yeah.
avatars within the meta
That nobody uses.
Nobody wants to.
I didn't even know that was. You know what it reminds me of is that. Well, I don't know. This might be a niche reference, but that one episode of Community where the dean gets that big headset. Maybe some of our listeners will know, but it's basically the same thing. Instead of like just searching something, he's like, "I got this fancy new computer," and it is. He's like running through this land to change the time settings, and
Right.
it's the whole thing. It's just it's not very practical.
That's what that's making fun of. I think that's
exactly.
Like nobody
right?
wants Mark Zuckerberg's like virtual me fest. It looks like the Mii's from Wii. That's what they look like. It like
Oh my god! Let's go bowling.
And we've misunderstood how people interact with technology. I mean, people have been pushing the idea of wearable computing since the 90s, probably mid 90s. And nobody likes it. Nobody enjoys it. The closest we've managed is a watch. We've never done better than that. But the AR glasses, they're just a reason that you shouldn't be able to, have strange men in by the swing set. That's all they're good for. We as writers have these failures of imagination, and consistently, we've always gotten it wrong. A friend of ours, Walter John Williams, was one of the kind of first cyberpunk writers, and he did a brilliant book that I loved in the 80s called Hardwired. And part of the plot was these guys driving across the desert trying to find a payphone so they could get their modem hooked up to the network. Nobody saw wireless coming.
Right.
Yep.
Nobody saw cell service coming. We're not technologists. We're storytellers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's why I love in the Expanse, just slap a screen that wraps around your wrist. I'm cool with that. I don't want to have fucking implants and augments and all this kind of stuff. It's just it's kind of like an extraneous fantasy that
anybody who has experienced how often basic technology just fucking stops working.
Yeah.
Does not want an implant.
If it's inside your body, you can't just
Right.
smack
What
it.
are you gonna
starts
do?
again.
Yeah. I mean, you
how
could,
many times
but
do you
it's not
press
gonna feel
the
good.
start button on something and it just doesn't come on, or it gives you a flashing red thing, and you're like, God damn it, now I gotta fix this or buy a new one or whatever. Nobody wants that in their body.
Yeah. Like the Xbox 360 3 Rings of Death.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Nobody wants that in their body.
No.
Oh my god.
Well, speaking of things that didn't fail, let's talk about.
Yeah, I was gonna say we got to dig into your new book. We keep doing this where we get very far into the chat with our guests before we dig into the book we're talking about.
Sorry, publicists.
Publicists. Yeah, but look, we're talking about it, so go to the 40-minute mark.
Yeah.
So we got to talk about Mercy of the Gods. It's book 1 in the Captive War series. So to start things off in this part of the conversation, can you pitch our listeners on it? Talk a little bit about it. Talk about the origins. Where did the idea come from? All of those kind of foundational things.
You're the one that writes pitches, dude.
All right.
You're the one that was all about peak pitch, though, Ty.
So the Captives War is kind of the other side of space opera from the Expanse. The Expanse is Alfred Bester and Larry Niven and Arthur Clarke, and this grounded science fiction that really kind of considers that part of a history. But there's a whole different realm of science fiction that is Dune and Left Hand of Darkness and all of these things that are very far future, very broad canvases, and we've moved over there to do this. And the story was really, this is Ty's idea. He's the idea guy, and he pitched, what if you re-envisioned the biblical book of Daniel as epic science fiction? If you have this person who is taken by the great empire, the way that the slaves were taken to Babylon, and incorporated into the mechanisms of empire, and how you deal with being the functionary of your oppressor, and also maintaining yourself and maintaining your view and maintaining your struggle against oppression in that context. And I thought, yeah, no, that sounds awesome. We should do that.
Not just because it's based on the book of Daniel or anything, but
nah, I mean, it's a little ego involved, but
just a smidge.
Yeah.
But on that note, like why was, since you're kind of adapting the book of David and this epic biblical story in the context of epic space opera, why was David Alcor, and I would like include his cohorts there, because like the first part of the book is like introducing David and also his sort of like the scientific team that he works for and that kind of thing. Why were they kind of like the ideal POVs to explore this very dangerous situation, this survival against the Carracks, if I'm pronouncing that properly?
Well, I mean, so the this is another thing science fiction always gets wrong. So the story where aliens fly vast, expensive spaceships across hundreds of light years to come steal your water, or to steal your iron or your titanium, are ludicrous, or they come to eat you. Those are ludicrous ideas. So what is the one actually rare resource in the universe? Intelligence. That's rare, right? Much rarer than water or titanium or anything else that aliens might want. So an alien species that says, we're going to go collect all of the intelligence from these other species and put it to work for us. So we don't have to invent everything. We'll have these people who invent things for us because we went and got them and they're smart. And so that once you start from that premise, that what the Carracks do is they collect intelligence, they collect inventiveness, then the people who are going to get taken back to their world are the edge of scientific learning, or this edge of learning, I should say, the edge of inventiveness. So your best scientists, your best engineers, your best creatives, all of those people get taken back, and that's that. And then you're actually collecting something that isn't super common throughout the universe. Mm-hmm. You're collecting something that's actually rare and hard to get.
And we're doing it because that's what Nebuchadnezzar was doing. Nebuchadnezzar was going out and taking the elite of the nations he conquered and bringing them back, and bringing back their excellence, and bringing their talents and their wisdom and their insight. And that was what made Babylon great.
Well, and I mean, what Nebuchadnezzar was doing is actually forced integration. So you conquer a kingdom, you bring all their best and brightest back to Babylon and turn them into functionaries of the bureaucracy. And you put a bunch of Babylonians in that kingdom to work there. And now you forcibly integrated the two empires. Some of their leaders are your guys, some of your leaders are their guys. And now it quickly gets over the hurdle of you've been conquered and you need to listen to us. It more quickly gets over that. And that's the genius of what that empire is doing. And so that's the idea, is we're just going to forcibly integrate these two empires, and we're going to take all of the best stuff you have, your best ideas, and we'll integrate them into our understanding of the universe. And we'll always be the smartest because we're taking the smartest from everyone else and putting it into our thing. It's
like the Borg in Star Trek.
No, except it's not.
Except it's not.
The Borg don't do that. The Borg turn everyone into the Borg, which is actually counterproductive.
Right, okay.
What the Carricks do is they want you to stay what you are. They don't want you to become Carricks. They want you to stay what you are, but they want you to keep inventing things. They want you to keep discovering things.
Right.
They want you to keep having novel ideas.
And feeding that all into a singular sort of like system.
Exactly. They want the library of every great idea. They want the library of Alexandria, the library of every great idea, no matter what the species or system is. No Borg has an original idea because every Borg has only ideas we're Borg. Which, I mean, I loved Star Trek like everybody else, and I thought the Borg were cool. But looking back on it when we were talking about this, that's the worst way to do this.
That's like the worst form of like the hive mind.
Yeah, because you stripping out everything that makes them unique to turn them into you, which means that they're never going to have an idea you wouldn't have already had.
Which is to say, ChatGPT.
Right?
Full circle, man. Full circle.
Yeah, callbacks, man. It's all about the callbacks.
But touching on something you said, Daniel, where you said that this series is kind of like you veering in the other direction away from the Expanse, where.
But it's a different part of the genre. It's a different
part of the genre.
Space within the genre.
Mm-hmm. But still using human characters, just not having. It can be both a good thing, but it can also be a burden of Earth and the solar system and the sort of environment that we're very familiar with. How was it for the two of you to kind of like, okay, we're going to go to a far-flung planet. We're going to have different species. We're going to have different, very, very like alien environments and all this kind of stuff.
The hardest thing for me, and I'll let Ty answer for himself, but the hardest thing for me was the restrictions that puts on cultural reference. You can't. You have to think about, okay, well, they're doing this with plastic. Are they going to have plastic? I mean, is plastic an Earth thing, or okay, in the Expanse, it is plausible for someone to quote Shakespeare. It's not really plausible for somebody to quote Shakespeare in, Left Hand of Darkness or Dune. And so if you want that moment, then you have to kind of invent your own Shakespeare, your science fiction Shakespeare, your space Shakespeare, and then come up with something that's as good as Shakespeare to quote that nobody else. It doesn't. There's an obstacle to the craft of prose that you put in there when you remove it, when you remove the story from history.
Ty?
Yeah, I mean that, I guess.
What he said.
That wasn't a huge struggle for me. It was more you need the people in the story to feel like people, to feel like us. You don't want them to feel totally alien. At the same time, in the Mercy of Gods, we're talking about people who've been separated from the rest of humanity for thousands of years, and so would have different religions, different sort of worldviews, different philosophies, and how much of that can you include in there before they start to feel like aliens? So that's sort of a tightrope you have to walk. That like they're us. They have completely different religious beliefs and completely different mythology and all of that stuff, but they're still just us. That's a little bit of tricky razor's edge to walks.
Yeah.
And really, the whole thing is just trying to keep all of that unobtrusive enough that it doesn't bump readers out of the story. Everything is in service of being able to fall into the story and not get distracted from it by something that we did. Then thinking, well, he's maudlin. Well, how can you be maudlin if there's no Christ? Because there's Mary Magdalene, where maudlin came from, and then all of a sudden you're thinking about something that's not on the page. And that's a problem with it's the same problem you have in fantasy, but in this case we're doing it in this far enough future that it winds up kind of wrapping around have the same problem.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what I was going to say. It's like that's the closest science fiction gets to fantasy.
Yeah, where that's the challenge there.
Yeah.
Every word you use, like, oh man, I just wanted to describe this movement as robotic. There's no robots in this world. I can't do that.
There's a very well received and very popular fantasy book that I read one time that referred to somebody as non-comatose. Bumped me right out.
Yeah.
And it's just diction.
Right. Yeah. The details, all in the details.
All of it, man.
Yeah. Well, to kind of wind down part one of our chat with you guys, let's talk about some details, but details in your writing career. I want to, because you guys have had so much success in so many different areas, both working together, working separately, working in, various areas of this industry and also film and television, stuff like that. Can each of you kind of share a favorite moment or achievement or like something that stands out that was just really, I don't know, put the little fuzzies in your tummy, right? Like something that was just really a happy moment, I think
you made
it's
it
fun
so
for
cute,
writers.
MJ.
It's fun for writers to talk about those things. So can each of you share if you have one of those?
Do you have fuzzy moments?
Yeah, I mean, when the Kurgan reached out to me to tell me what a huge fan of the Expanse he was. That was a bit of, and every time one of our books comes out, he sends me a picture of him reading it, and so I have a bunch of pictures of the Kurgan reading my books. That's cool.
That's so cool.
That is really awesome.
The weird moment I had, the one that I kind of keep coming back to, in the first season of The Expanse, there's a bit where Miller is going between stations on a little transport and winds up talking to a missionary. Talks to this Mormon missionary guy. And I was on set, and the actor we had playing the Mormon missionary was like right next to me. And I was thinking, I made you up so that I could have dialogue in that chapter. I had to have somebody else sit. There were no other characters on that ship except Miller. I needed to have dialogue in that chapter, and now you have a job. That's weird.
It's like a puppet master moment, yeah?
Well, it's just the ways in which a specific technical, formal problem on the page that I needed to solve turned into this dude in a suit. It was a surreal moment.
Yeah.
I should probably clarify, because not everybody's as old as I am. If you're not as old as I am, the Kurgan is a character from a TV show called Highlander, played by the fine actor Clancy Brown. So give Clancy credit.
Many things besides that as well.
Yes,
yes, many things besides the Kurgan. Yes,
I think he gets a little tired of being called, being identified with a thing he did at the very beginning of his career. It's like, he played all of these amazing other things, this huge career, but we're going to remember the first thing you did, and that's and then from kind of gloss over your entire. That's
because he killed it. It's because it was amazing.
He did own that movie.
Oh, well, I love both of those. Those are great. Well, yeah, we're gonna close out just asking some more greedy questions, because listeners and viewers always appreciate a little bit of writing advice. So first, we'll ask you for a good bit of soundbite writing advice. I'll let both of you take a pick who wants to do it, but the other person gets to offer up a weird or random fact that you find to be utterly fascinating.
I got publishing advice if you got a random fact.
I have no random facts.
Okay. Let me see if I can come up with a random fact.
I also have no advice for writers. So the problem with writing advice is everybody tries to think of something clever that no one else has said before. And that's all nonsense, because everybody already knows the writing advice. The writing advice is very simple. The writing advice is you got to read, because you're trying to turn into a machine that produces prose. If you don't put anything in the machine, nothing comes out. You got to read all the time. If you want to get good at writing, The only way to do that, literally the only way to do that, is to write a shit ton. Everybody, what my first writing teacher told me, everybody has 10,000 pages of crap in them. You have to write until that 10,000 pages of crap have moved through the system. And now the good work can start moving through the system. But you got to get the 10,000 pages of crap out. And the only way to do that is to write a bunch of terrible stuff. Everybody wrote their awful stuff when they were in junior high. If you're a writer, you wrote your terrible stuff in junior high. You wrote your terrible stuff in high school. That's those 10,000 pages of crap moving through the system. And everybody wants a shortcut because it's hard. It's hard to sit down and write a bunch of stuff that is never going to go anywhere.
And humiliating. I mean,
it's humiliating.
That too.
But there's only one way to do it.
We trunk that shit and we never look back.
Right? We hide it.
And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having a trunk full of terrible novels. Everybody does.
I like it.
I love
So
that, yeah.
The advice that I had wasn't actually writing advice, was publishing advice. Because I was talking to a woman who, her first novel just came out. And the best advice that Ty and I got when we were kind of going into the Expanse, a friend of ours said, okay, start the second novel before the book comes out. Be into the second thing before the first one comes out. Because either the first one's going to come out and everybody's going to hate it and it's not going to sell for shit and you're going to be devastated and you're not going to be able to work on it. Or it's going to be celebrated and successful and it's going to be great and you're going to freeze up because how are you going to be able to match that again? Either way, you're fucked. So already be in the middle of it. Already be down the road before that happens. You don't want to be there. You don't want to be there when it drops. So that's I thought that was very wise and has worked out to be true. So that was my advice.
The person who gave us that advice had written a bunch of novels, and she is very wise. So we took her advice, and we're happy we did it.
Yeah. And she's got a new one coming out that's fucking awesome. If anybody's looking for something that has absolutely nothing to do with what we write, there's a book coming out called The Naturalist Society by Carrie Vaughn.
Oh, nice.
It's some of the best stuff she's ever done, and she's done some good stuff.
Yeah, Carrie's a very amazing writer.
Very good.
I don't know, weird things. Sharks are older than the rings of Saturn. How about that? That's
there
weird.
We go.
That's a great random fact. I love that.
I'm very succinct too.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
is it any one specific shark that's older, or?
Yeah, Dave the shark. He's just been hanging out.
Shark.
So old.
Yeah, he's a little creaky, but he's not very arthritic because he doesn't have bones.
Right.
There you go.
There you go. Benefits of being a shark.
If you ever want to avoid arthritis, just be a shark.
Come back as a shark.
Way to go. Yeah. Reincarnate as a shark. You'll be good. Daniel, Ty, thank you so much for chatting with MJ and I today. We really appreciate it. If you could please let everyone know where they can find you online.
Good Lord.
Literally nowhere.
Yeah, no. I've got like a Blue Sky account that I come into every minute or two, but that's I believe that there is a website, www.jamessacorey.com, which is maintained by our publisher, at which all important commercial announcements will be made.
There's also a James S.A. Corey Twitter account, which is also maintained by our publisher, where they make announcements. And I assume there's some Facebook thing like that.
There's also our Patreon thing, though. We always forget to
talk
about that.
Oh, no, that's true. That's true.
That's
we
true.
should talk
we're doing this Patreon project where we're writing a book in public.
Ooh, cool.
So if you go to Patreon and search for James S.A. Corey Writes a Novel, we're a little over a third of the way through a completely unrelated project where we've been filming the discussions around the thing and posting all of the outlines and rough drafts and edited drafts and
so if anybody who wants to know what it looks like when Daniel and I collaborate and write something, not only is everything online, but we agreed, the two of us, we never talk about that book when we're not recording.
So
literally every discussion we have about the book is recorded.
The whole schmear is there.
Very
Right.
So
cool.
you could find us there.
All right.
Yeah,
I found it
absolutely.
already, so I will link to it in the show notes for anyone who wants to check it out.
All right.
Direct link. And go pick up, you got these books right here. I got this beautiful collection. Go check out The Expanse. Go check out The Expanse TV show because it's fucking awesome. Go pick up Mercy of Gods, which is out now when this episode airs. So go support Daniel and Ty and their new series. But yeah, thank you both so much again. Really appreciate it.
Good seeing you.
You can also follow SFF Addicts on Instagram, Twitter, all that jazz at SFF Addicts Pod. You can follow me at Adrian M. Gibson. You can go get Mushroom Blues in paperback, hardcover, and ebook. MJ, what about you?
Yeah, you can find me across all the main socials at MJ Kuhn Books or just mjkuhn.com. And you can buy my books to help me feed my cat. Thank you.
Thorn is hungry. He's a
Doran
hungry
is
kitty.
hungry.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. That's it for this episode. Stay tuned next week for part 2 with Daniel and Ty, where we are going to do a mini masterclass on writing as collaboration. For now, keep reading, keep imagining, and we'll see you next time on SFF Addicts.